friends! In this video, I'm going to show you how to knit this super simple beanie. But first, let's talk about what you're going to need for this project. You're going to need some knitting needles. I'm going to use these number 10 6mm knitting needles on a 14-inch cable. I'm going to be knitting in the round for this project. You'll also need some scissors and some stitch markers. Before we jump into it, I want to show you my swatch. I've decided for this project we're going to do a 2 knit 1 purl, 2 knit 1 purl rib, and we're going to do a stockinette stitch for the rest of the hat. So the gauge for this project is about 6 stitches per inch and about 5 rows per inch. So since we know the gauge is about 6 stitches per inch, I measured around my head and it's about 21 inches. But there's a lot of stretch in this stitch because of that ribbed brim, and the stockinette stitch itself has a lot of stretch. So I'm going to reduce the circumference from 21 inches down to 18 inches. So now I'm going to multiply 18 inches by 6 stitches, because there's 6 stitches per inch, and that brings us to 108. So I'm going to be casting on 108 stitches. I'm going to be doing a long tail cast on because that's the only cast on that I know. I don't measure, I just pull enough yarn that I think that's gotta be enough for 108 stitches, no? So to begin my cast on, I take my yarn, I create a little loop by holding both sides of the yarn in one hand, cross the loop over itself, and then I put my fingers into the little loop that's there and I grab the yarn's tail. And when I pull that, that's a slip knot, and I'm going to just put that slip knot on the needle. Now, I'm going to show you how my grandma showed me. You take the yarn in your index finger on one hand. This is the tail, and this is the working yarn. So the working yarn is in my left hand, the yarn tail is in my right hand. And I take the yarn and I loop it over my finger, and then I bring it over the needle so that the loop is completely twisted over the needle. Let me show you again. Looped over my finger, and then the closest bit of yarn goes over the needle. Then with the working yarn, I wrap that around the front of the needle. Then that loop goes back over the needle and I can pull the tail. And there's a stitch. Create another loop on my finger, put it over the needle, wrap the yarn around the needle, put that loop back over the needle and draw tight. And there's another stitch. Do it again, wrap it around my finger, loop it over the needle, wrap the yarn from back to front over the needle, pass the loop over the needle again, and pull tight. I'm sure there are 100 other ways to do this task, but this is the way I was shown when I was a little kid, and I never looked for another way to do it because this worked for me. Hopefully it works for you, but I am going to cast on now with this exact same method. I'm going to cast on 108 stitches. So when I hit 108, I will meet you back here to show you what we're going to do next. 108. That seems like an awful lot of stitches, but I'm going to just trust my measurements. All right, 108 stitches cast on my needles. All right, so I'm gonna make sure that the stitches aren't twisted. Make sure they are all nice and straight on the needles. I'm going to have my working yarn coming off to the left, but I'm gonna flip my work so that it's my working yarn and working needle are on the right side in my right hand, but the yarn is still trailing to the left. Now I'm going to pull up those first stitches that we put on the needle. So to join the round, we're going to insert the needle into the first stitch. Then we're going to yarn over, passing the yarn in front of the needle. And then we're going to loop that first stitch over onto the other needle. So that was a knit stitch. I'm going to do another knit stitch for the second stitch. And now we're going to do a whole new stitch. All right, so for the next stitch, it's called a purl. So the yarn needs to be in front of the work for this stitch. So for the knit stitch, we had the yarn behind the work like that. For the purl stitch, we have it in front of the work, and we're going to stick the needle in front. So for the knit stitch, we stuck the needle back here. For the purl stitch, we're gonna stick the needle up here. And then we're gonna pass the yarn around the needle, just like that, and then pull the loop off onto the other needle. And that's a purl. So I did 2 knit stitches and then 1 purl. And now I put the yarn back in the back. I'm gonna do 2 more knit stitches. There's 1. There's 2. And now I'm gonna switch back to purls. So yarn goes in front of the work, needle gets inserted into the front of the stitch, yarn over, and then you pull the needle off, like that. And then we're going to do 2 more knit stitches. There's 1, and there's 2. And then we're gonna do a purl stitch. There's 1, and then 2 knit stitches, 1 and 2, and then a purl stitch. And this can be a little bit finicky because it's the first round and sometimes the stitches are a little tight in the first round. So if it's a little bit difficult on this first round, don't give up. It's difficult. It's not because you don't know what you're doing. It is a little bit more difficult on the first round. So I'm going to repeat these stitches. So knit, knit, purl, knit, knit, purl, all the way around. And when I get back to where the join is, I'll meet you there and I'll show you how we're going to work up the next round. All right, I made it up to the last stitch of my first round here, and my last stitch is a purl. If you multiplied by 6, you should also be ending on a purl for yours. And that brings us back to our first stitch of that round, which is a knit stitch. And now we're going to do a bunch of rounds of this exact same repeat. So I'm going to be doing knit, knit, purl, knit, knit, purl. And I'm going to do that around a total of 12 rounds. And when you finish those 12 rounds, you're gonna have a really cute little brim of your beanie. At least that's my plan. I'm gonna zoom through this part and I'm just going to enjoy watching a couple of YouTube videos and knitting. And I will meet you back here once I've got my brim done. All right, and here I am, just completed the 12 rounds. And you can see it makes this nice chunky rib. And that 12 rows is just about 2 inches. And now we are going to skip to a new stitch. We're gonna start working up the body of the hat. So that is gonna be the brim of the hat. And now we are going to work up the body. And the body of this hat is going to be just stockinette. So that means we're just gonna knit. We're just gonna knit in the round for a lot of rows. I think we're gonna be doing about 36 rows total. I'm gonna zoom through it. I'll pop in here and show you what it's looking like bit by bit to show you what the hat is looking like once we get to the 36th row and what we're gonna do to move forward with this hat pattern. Okay, I made it to the end of round number 36. This is round 30. And now I'm going to do something else for round number 37. For the first 2 stitches, I'm gonna knit 2 together. Let me zoom you in. So for the first 2 stitches of the round, I'm going to knit 2 together. That's my first 2 stitches. So I'm gonna knit the 3rd, knit the 4th, 5th, and 6th. And now it's the next grouping of 6, so I'm going to knit 2 together. And then that's 2, so 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then I'm gonna knit 2 together. So that's 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and I'm just going to repeat that all the way around. So the first 2 stitches in a grouping of 6, I'm going to knit 2 together like this, 1 and 2, and then 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then knit 2 together. And I'm going to repeat that all the way around until I get back to the beginning of the round. So I made it around 37, doing a decrease every 6 stitches. Now for 38, I'm just going to knit around, and I'll meet you back at the beginning of the round, and then we'll get into row number 39. And here I am coming up to the end of round number 38. And now for round number 39, we're going to begin by knitting 2 together. And we're going to work in groups of 5 this time. So last time we did groups of 6. We knitted the first 2 together and then knitted the next 4 stitches. This time we knit 2 together and then knit the next 3 stitches. And then we'll knit 2 together and then we'll knit 3 stitches, 2 and 3. And then we'll knit 2 together and then knit 3 stitches. And I'm just going to repeat that all the way around. And when I get to the end of round number 39, for round number 40, I'm just going to do a regular knit all the way around. So I'll see you at the end of round number 40, and we'll talk about what's next. And now for row number 41, we're going to follow the same decrease, but we're going to work in groups of 4 this time. So we worked in 6s and then in 5s. Now we're going to work in 4s. So what that means is we're going to start by knitting 2 together, which is 1 and 2, and then we're going to do 2 more knits, 3 and 4. And then in the next grouping, we'll knit 2 together, so that's 1 and 2, and then we'll knit 3 and 4. And then the next 2, and we'll just repeat this, knit 2 together, then knit 2, knit 2 together, then knit 2. And we'll repeat that all the way around for round number 41. And then for round number 42, we're going to just knit all the way around. So I'll see you at the end of round number 42. All right, I just finished round number 42. So for round number 43, I'm going to start again with knitting 2 together. And now I'm going to knit 1. And then I'm going to knit 2 together. Then I'm going to knit 1. And I'm going to do that repeat all the way around, which is going to reduce our rounds by quite a bit. You're going to see it's going to shrink this quite a bit down on this round. And just repeat that over and over, knit 2 together, then knit 1, knit 2 together, then knit 1, until you get back to the beginning of the round. And then for round number 44, just knit all the way around. All right, and now it's time for our last row of decreases before we're going to just do the drawstring method. So for this last round, I'm going to actually do knit 2 together for every stitch around. So no knit 1s in between. I'm just going to knit 2 together for every stitch. And this might make it a little bit fiddly for you. Don't worry about it. Just take your time and knit 2 together all the way around. All right, and there I am at the last reduction of the row. You can see I had to do the magic loop because it got a little bit fiddly, but that's okay. Now it's time to cast off. So to cast off, I'm going to knit 1 stitch, knit a 2nd stitch, and then pass the 1st stitch over the 2nd stitch. That's how I do it. Knit a stitch, and then pull the previous stitch over top of that one. Knit 1, pass the previous over, and I'm just going to repeat that until there are no stitches left on the needles, which should not take too long. Ta-da! All right, so what I'm going to do is get a yarn needle, and we're going to close up this hole on the top. But first, let me show you what the top of this hat looks like. You can see, because we did the reductions, it's come in almost all the way. So the last little bit, we'll use the drawstring method, and then we'll have this perfect rounded top for the beanie. I'm going to start by turning the hat inside out, then I'll thread up my needle. All right, and now I'm going to take my yarn needle here, and I'm going to just weave up and down each of the stitches on this last row, just like this, up and down, and I'll just pull the yarn through periodically here. And here we go. Now I'm back to where I started. I'll pull the yarn through, and then there's this yarn tail left, and I'm just gonna knot that together a couple of times so that's nice and tight. And then I will turn the hat over just to make sure it's all closed up, and it totally is. so we can trim the yarn. Now, since I didn't need this long tail, I wasn't sure, so I left it just in case we needed it for something. I am just going to trim that tail, and then I'm going to use my yarn needle and weave in that end on the inside so it won't be visible. So I'm gonna be honest, it's a little large. It looks big. Look at how much it can stretch. It stretches so much, but it's going to be a super cozy beanie. Before I do the outro shots on this thing, I think I'm going to wash it in some hot water just to shrink it down a bit, because this is wool. So I think that I'll soak it in hot water and then block it to dry, and we'll get the pictures of the after shots of this hat after it's been blocked and dried. This is what I've got for you today, friends. What do you think? It's all finished. The beautiful stockinette stitch really highlights that gorgeous yarn color. This was a naturally dyed with onion skins yarn we did a few videos ago. I love, love, love this brim. I think the 2 knit 1 purl combination made for a really cute chunky ribbed stitch, and the reverse has this really cute pinstripe sort of vibe. But look at those stitches. I'm pretty proud of my evenness with this. I'm pretty new to knitting. This is my first ever knitted beanie, so considering I tried, I made a swatch, I did my best. It came out a little bigger than I wanted, so take that into consideration if you're making this hat also. But aside from it being a little bit big, I think it turned out amazing. I really am pleased with that beautiful stitch definition. Just look at that. Isn't that something? I love it, but let me know what you think. What do you think of this hat? Do you think you're gonna try and make one? What do you think of the rib stitch? Are you more of a 1x1 rib knit person, or maybe a 2x2? I'm pretty new to it, like I said, but I think that this turned out awesome. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to this month's patrons. The list of patrons for this month is displayed now on the screen. Thank you guys for supporting me. If you'd like to join the Patreon, check the links in the description down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!